I need to begin with a confession. I've been a dedicated Whovian since the show returned in 2005. I've seen quite a bit of classic Who as well, plus the movie from the 90s. I bought the merchandise, joined the message boards, wrote fan fiction, and cosplayed as various doctors at multiple Comic Cons. Doctor Who has been one of my all-time favorite IPs for nearly 2 decades. But it's time to ask a painful question. Should Doctor Who be cancelled? My answer, after years of watching this beloved series stumble and fall, is yes. Not forever, but shelved, as it was in the 80s, until more capable, creative, and less arrogant writers take it over with original ideas that stay true to classic Doctor Who. Here's why. Let's start with the least emotional evidence: viewership. According to Barb, the UK's official television ratings body, and BBC reporting, Doctor Who's overnight consolidated ratings have steadily declined over the past 9 years, beginning during the later Capaldi era and accelerating sharply during the Jodie Whittaker years. Jodie Whittaker's debut episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, drew 11 million viewers, but her series finale, The Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos, viewership had dropped to 6.7 million. The decline continued relentlessly. By Series 12, episodes were pulling in around 4 million viewers, with some episodes dropping below that threshold. One episode of Series 12 nosedived to only 3.97 million viewers, marking it as the least viewed episode since 1986, a loss of 910,000 viewers since the first episode of that season. Then came the Ncuti Gatwa era, which was supposed to be a grand revival. It was not. The overnight ratings for the first 6 episodes of Series 14 averaged around 2 million each, with the episode Boom posting a franchise low of just 2.04 million viewers. Even the 7-day consolidated figures offered little comfort. Series 14's premiere, Space Babies, managed 4.01 million in its 7-day window, while subsequent episodes struggled to even double their overnight numbers. Series 15 fared no better. The season averaged just 3.8 million viewers according to Barb's gold standard 28-day viewing figures, representing a decline of 1 million on their prior season. To put this in perspective, both Gatwa seasons were down on Jodie Whittaker's concluding season in 2021, which watched by 5.2 million people, a period that was not considered to be vintage Doctor Who. While modern TV metrics are more complex than raw overnight numbers, the trend is undeniable. Doctor Who has consistently failed to reverse this downward trajectory even after a full reboot tone reset, a historic casting change, the return of Russell T Davies, or the introduction of Disney funding. None of it worked. Even Davies himself admitted the numbers might not be the ratings we'd love, though he tried to spin it by claiming success with younger demographics. A show can survive declining ratings. What it can't survive is declining ratings combined with declining goodwill, and Doctor Who has both in spades. Peter Capaldi is widely regarded as an excellent doctor. Review aggregators reflect that. But among fans, his era was deeply divisive, and this division set the stage for everything that followed. Common criticisms from the fan base included Bill Potts as the final companion who, while praised by some, failed to resonate long-term with a significant portion of the audience. The unresolved and ultimately abandoned Ashildr storyline, featuring Game of Thrones actress Maisie Williams, felt like wasted potential, a character introduced with great fanfare who simply disappeared without meaningful closure. Unlike his predecessors, Capaldi's Doctor lacked a defining outfit or cultural iconography that captured the public imagination. There was no catchphrase that stuck. The short-lived and unpopular sonic sunglasses replaced the iconic screwdriver, a change that felt arbitrary and irritating to longtime fans. Perhaps most critically, the storylines grew increasingly convoluted and inaccessible. While Peter Capaldi had some great episodes, some considered the greatest in New Who history, and Jenna Coleman was terrific, the writing began to let the Doctor down during this era. Episodes that should have been straightforward adventures became tangled in mythology and arc plotting that alienated casual viewers while frustrating devoted fans who couldn't follow the threads. At the time, Chris Chibnall, then merely a frequent writer, was already blamed by many fans for tonal issues in episodes he penned. Ironically, things only worsened when he took full control as showrunner. The Capaldi era, for all of its critical acclaim, failed to maintain the cultural foothold Doctor Who had enjoyed under Tennant and Smith. It was a warning sign that went unheeded. If you've made it this far and are enjoying what you've seen and heard, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Casting Jodie Whittaker as the first female Doctor was historic. It generated massive headlines, brought in new viewers, and should have been a triumph. Instead, it became one of the most divisive moments in the franchise's history. And here's the crucial point. Not because the Doctor can't be a woman, but because the writing failed her spectacularly. It was everything around Jodie Whittaker that failed. The stories were weak, convoluted, and overstuffed. There were too many companions, and the scheduling was erratic. Under Chris Chibnall's stewardship, character depth was flattened. The Doctor, who had always been morally complex, sometimes arrogant, sometimes manipulative, occasionally ruthless in service of the greater good, became one-dimensional. Moral complexity vanished, replaced by simplistic lectures. Also, Jodie Whittaker herself, in my opinion, was a horrible choice for this role. I would not go as far as to say she's a bad actress. That's not necessarily true. But in order to be the Doctor, you have to be a certain kind of actor or actress. You have to have a certain gravitas to you. You have to be able to eat up the scenery around you and have all the focus on you while not completely overshadowing everything around you at all times. Tennant did it, Smith did it, Capaldi did it. Many classic Doctors did it. I believe myriad of other actresses could have done it. Jodie Whittaker was just not the right woman to fill those shoes, in my humble opinion, as she came off far more as a goofy, lecturous schoolmarm than a hyper-intelligent, interdimensional alien. Stories became blunt allegories instead of layered sci-fi. Fan reviews on Rotten Tomatoes were filled with criticism that the writing was suited for a CBBC show rather than Doctor Who, that stories were boring, dialogue stilted, and the approach preachy and condescending. This wasn't representation through storytelling, it was representation through lecturing, and audiences noticed, voting with their remotes as viewership plummeted. Whittaker's entire tenure was defined by the Timeless Child arc, overshadowing her performance and ensuring she'll be remembered for controversy rather than her considerable talents as an actor. The first female Doctor deserved so much better than what Chibnall was able to give her. The fact that Jodie Whittaker never saw the criticism because she wisely stayed off social media doesn't erase the damage done to both her legacy and the show's. Doctor Who has always been political. The difference is that it used to be clever about it. The show tackled racism in stories set on alien planets. It explored fascism through the lens of Daleks. It examined environmental destruction, corporate greed, and the dangers of unchecked authority, all wrapped in compelling science fiction that entertained first and provoked thought second. Recent seasons replaced metaphor with megaphones. Episodes became thinly veiled moral lessons with one-dimensional villains representing real-world targets. The subtlety disappeared. Stories that should have been about adventure and wonder became seminars on contemporary social issues, beating viewers over the head with messaging that lacked nuance and narrative sophistication. This shift alienated not only conservative viewers, but longtime progressive fans who simply wanted better writing. The problem wasn't the politics, it was the lack of craft in presenting them. When every episode feels like homework rather than entertainment, when the message overshadows the story, you've lost the plot. Literally, escapism disappeared. Doctor Who had always been a place to escape from the mundane world, to explore the universe through the eyes of a madman in a blue box. But when every story is a direct commentary on current events, when every alien threat is just a stand-in for politicians or social movements the writers disapprove of, there's nowhere left to escape to. The TARDIS became a soapbox, and viewers tuned out by the millions. Then came The Timeless Child and Flux, the storylines that may have done irreparable damage to Doctor Who's mythology. The Timeless Child retcon revealed the Doctor is not a Time Lord at all, but rather the Timeless Child, a being who potentially predates the universe itself and who became the base genetic code for every Gallifreyan who lives within the Citadel. This represented the biggest change in the Doctor's personal lore since the Time Lords were introduced in 1969. Many fans were shaken by the revelation that William Hartnell isn't the first Doctor at all, with notable continuity problems created for previous storylines. Others objected on a thematic level, arguing it turns the Doctor into some sort of superhuman being rather than a renegade Time Lord, diminishing her as a character rather than adding depth. The execution was equally problematic. The retcon was conducted in a rather clumsy manner, with a focus on canon and continuity for its own sake and dependence on excessive exposition, as the Master simply narrated the Doctor's entire revised backstory in a flashback. Fan backlash was immediate and sustained. The retcon was so ill-received that the BBC had to issue an apology to upset viewers. This wasn't bold reinvention, it was narrative vandalism, rewriting decades of established lore to serve one showrunner's vision with no regard for the franchise's history or the fans who invested in that history. Doctor Who Flux had the opportunity to address these concerns and develop the Timeless Child storyline in meaningful ways, but instead of avoiding answering the questions fans desperately wanted resolved, killing the one advantage the retcon held: intrigue. The storyline that should have been epic and transformative became an albatross around the show's neck. Unlike past experiments that could be quietly walked back or ignored, the Timeless Child fundamentally altered the Doctor's origin, and while Russell T Davies has acknowledged it in his return rather than retconning it away, he's essentially relegated it to a state of narrative superposition, still canon but diminished in importance and attributed to the toymaker's interference rather than literal truth. The damage, however, was done. When ratings continued to fall and goodwill evaporated, the show did something telling. It brought back David Tennant, the most popular Doctor of the modern era, not for a special cameo, not for a multi-Doctor anniversary celebration, for an entire trilogy of specials where he played a brand new incarnation, the 14th Doctor, who just so happened to look exactly like the 10th. While the 60th anniversary specials were entertaining and well received by many fans, the move reeked of desperation. The show no longer trusted its own future, so it reached into its past and pulled out the safety blanket of nostalgia. Some reviewers saw it as merely a nostalgia trip to get viewers back on board for the Gatwa era, rather than a genuine celebration. The specials felt like Tennant, Tate, and Davies doing 3 more episodes of the same show they left in 2010, like nothing had happened in between, rather than moving the franchise forward. The introduction of Bi-Generation, where the 14th Doctor splits into both himself and the 15th Doctor, allowed Tennant to stick around indefinitely as a safety net, suggesting the producers weren't confident that Gatwa could carry the show alone. And you know what? Tennant's return briefly spiked interest, but it only underscored a brutal truth. Doctor Who no longer trusted its own future. It couldn't sell audiences on where it was going, so it returned to where it had been. That's not creative confidence. That's a show on life support, desperately trying to recapture past glory rather than forge a new path. The Disney Plus partnership was supposed to save Doctor Who. With Disney's massive budget and global reach, the show would finally have the resources it needed to compete with prestige sci-fi. The BBC and Disney announced the deal in October 2022 with great fanfare, positioning it as the beginning of a new era. Instead, the partnership became another cautionary tale. The deal ended up covering only 2 seasons of the show, series 14 and 15, with a combined 16 episodes, far below Doctor Who's historical norms. Doctor Who on Disney Plus didn't rise to the level of the streamer's Star Wars or Marvel franchises, never cracking Nielsen's list of the top 10 original streaming shows during its run. Multiple sources in Doctor Who's orbit indicated the Disney deal fell apart for a variety of reasons, including concerns over the show's failure to break out from its established fan base and its big-ticket budget. A former Disney executive stated, quote, "It was pretty apparent from early on that this wasn't for the long term. Everyone got the impression that it wasn't doing what it needed to do to be sustained," end quote. In October 2025, Disney Plus officially exited the partnership. While BBC drama boss Lindsay Salt thanked Disney for being terrific global partners, the Mouse House was not nearly as glowing, with a spokesperson simply confirming the BBC statement, a telling contrast in enthusiasm. The deal quietly ended after 2 short seasons when Disney walked away. That alone should set off alarms. When one of the world's largest entertainment companies, known for nurturing franchises and building expanded universes, decides your show isn't worth continuing after just 16 episodes, something is profoundly wrong. The truncation of Doctor Who seasons tells its own story of decline. Historically, a Doctor Who season featured 13 episodes plus a Christmas special. Under Peter Capaldi, that dropped to 12 episodes. Under Jodie Whittaker, it fell to 10 episodes with a New Year's special replacing Christmas. The Disney era brought just 8 episodes per season. These aren't just numbers, they represent diminishing confidence and resources. Shorter seasons means less room for a character development, fewer opportunities for experimental episodes, and less chance to build the kind of sprawling narratives that made Doctor Who special. The show that once dominated Saturday nights for months now barely makes a dent in the schedule. The gaps between seasons have also grown alarmingly large. After Series 15 concluded in May 2025, the BBC announced only a Christmas special for 2026, over a year and a half between new episodes. In a production diary for Doctor Who magazine, Davies wrote that while the series will never end, he was uncertain about its immediate future. Quote, "We don't know what's happening yet. And while everyone works that out, I'll take a pause on this page. Hopefully we'll have news soon." End quote. That's not the language of a confident franchise. That's a show in crisis, with its own showrunner publicly admitting he doesn't know what comes next. Russell T Davies returning to Doctor Who should have been the ultimate course correction. He was the architect of the 2005 revival, the man who made Doctor Who relevant again, who brought it back from cancellation and turned it into a cultural phenomenon. His return was greeted with celebration, but Davies' second tenure was marked by declining ratings and questionable creative decisions. Despite bringing back beloved elements like Murray Gold's music and the diamond logo, despite the increased budget from Disney, despite the nostalgic pull of David Tennant's return, the ratings continued to fall. More concerning has been the response to criticism. The overall tone from the show's leadership towards critics has been dismissive. When pressed about criticism during an interview, Ncuti Gatwa told critics, quote, "Don't watch," and suggested they, quote, "go out and touch grass." Davies himself told critics that, quote, "Twitter might kick off, and in dark little corners people might argue, but that's not the real world. The real world is one of acceptance," end quote. This attitude, that criticism stems from bigotry rather than legitimate creative concerns, has alienated longtime fans. When showrunners dismiss declining ratings and fan discontent as the ranting of trolls rather than signals that something might have gone wrong, they ensure those problems will continue. Davies seems unable or unwilling to recognize the landscape has changed since 2005. The tricks that worked then, the emotional manipulation, the soap opera plotting, the heavy-handed messaging, feel dated now, and doubling down on them while ratings plummet suggests a dangerous lack of self-awareness. And now we come to the most baffling decision yet, the return of Billie Piper. At the end of Series 15, Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor regenerates in a shocking moment. Emerging from the regeneration was Billie Piper, or rather, a character who looked exactly like Rose Tyler, the companion from the 10th Doctor's era. At the end of Doctor Who's most recent season, Gatwa regenerated into Billie Piper in a shocking twist that left fans confused about whether this is meant to be the 16th Doctor or some temporary situation. The BBC has remained tight-lipped about what this means, but the optics are terrible. This makes no sense from a storytelling perspective. Rose Tyler was a companion, not a doctor. Having the Doctor regenerate into the likeness of a former companion raises questions about identity, continuity, and basic logic that the show seems unprepared to answer. It feels like yet another desperate grab at nostalgia, bringing back a beloved actor from the golden age of modern Who in hopes that recognition alone will bring back viewers. Ncuti Gatwa exited the show under something of a cloud, with the actor later blaming burnout for his departure, which raises additional concerns about the working conditions and creative direction of the show. When your Doctor leaves after just 2 seasons, citing exhaustion, something is fundamentally broken. The Billie Piper twist represents everything wrong with current Doctor Who: a reliance on nostalgia over innovation, a willingness to break established rules for shock value, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the show great in the first place. I say all of this as someone who loves Doctor Who. I've defended this show through thick and thin. I've convinced friends to give it a chance. I've spent countless hours immersed in its universe, from the original series through the revival. But love sometimes means recognizing when something you care about needs to stop. Doctor Who needs to be shelved. Not forever. The franchise is too valuable, too beloved, and too culturally significant to abandon permanently. But it needs a rest. A long one. Time for the current regime to step away, for the Disney-era mistakes to fade from memory, for new creative voices to emerge with fresh perspective and genuine respect for what came before. The show was canceled in 1989 after years of declining quality and viewership. It rested for 16 years, minus the 1996 TV movie. When it returned in 2005 under Russell T Davies, it was rejuvenated, reimagined, and ready to conquer a new generation. That success proved the model works. Sometimes you need to let something die so it can be reborn stronger. The current iteration has had its chance. Multiple chances, actually. New doctors, new showrunners, massive budget increases, streaming partnerships, nostalgic returns. None of it has worked. The ratings keep falling. The creative decisions keep baffling longtime fans. The goodwill keeps evaporating. It's time to admit defeat and try again later, with more capable, creative, and less arrogant writers who can take it over with original ideas that stay true to classic Doctor Who. Writers who understand that political messages need to be woven into compelling stories, not substitute for them. Writers who respect the lore instead of rewriting it on a whim. Writers who trust their own vision instead of constantly reaching back to the past for validation. The TARDIS has traveled through time for 60 years. It can afford to park for a while, and when it returns, and it will return because Doctor Who is too important to stay gone, perhaps it can once again be the show that inspired a boy to dress up at Comic-Con, that sparked imaginations, that reminded us that the universe is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. But that show, that brilliant, groundbreaking, endlessly inventive show, it's not what's on our screens right now. And continuing to pretend otherwise does a disservice to everything Doctor Who once was and could be again. The Doctor has died and regenerated countless times. Maybe it's time for the show itself to do the same. This is a massive topic that I'm sure will bring out many varying opinions. I want to discuss all of these points with you and read your thoughts in the comments below. This has been 3PC, Past Present Pop Culture. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.